Rain slapped the cracked windshield as Imani clutched her last paycheck. Barely enough for rent. 10 minutes earlier, she'd been on her knees in a marble foyer, begging her white employer for one more week. "Please, Mrs. Brooke, my little sister's sick. I just need until Friday." The woman didn't even look down. "You people always need something." She waved toward the door like shooing a fly. Imani stood frozen, humiliation burning through her chest. She'd scrubbed that mansion for years, polished its floors until she saw her reflection. Yet in that moment she felt invisible. When the door slammed, thunder rolled behind her. She walked into the storm, head bowed, shoes soaking in puddles, whispering, "Lord, give me strength." The road ahead shimmered with rain when she saw something in the ditch, a man's arm, pale against the mud. "Hey, sir," she yelled, heart pounding. She ran closer, slipping, dropping to her knees beside him. His expensive suit was torn, soaked in blood and rainwater. His wheelchair lay twisted yards away, wheels still spinning. "Oh, God," she whispered, brushing dirt from his face. He was breathing, barely. "Hold on, okay? You ain't dying out here." Lightning flashed. In that white glare she saw who he was. Not some drifter, not a junkie. A polished watch, engraved initials, a gold ring that screamed old money. Imani swallowed hard, hands trembling. She looked at her beaten hands, then at his lifeless one. "Guess tables turn, huh?" she murmured, sliding her arms under his shoulders. With every grunt and step through mud, she dragged him toward her pickup. Her knees scraped gravel, breath ragged. But she didn't stop. Not tonight. When she finally heaved him onto the seat, she gasped, "You're safe now. Whoever did this ain't winning tonight." She started the truck. Wipers beat slow, like a heartbeat finding rhythm again. For the first time that day, she wasn't begging. She was saving someone. Rain hammered the hood as they disappeared down the empty Carolina road. If this already made your blood boil, hit like and subscribe right now, because stories like this are still happening and the world needs to hear them. The old truck rattled to a stop outside a one-room shack that leaned against the night like it was tired too. Imani left the headlights on just long enough to see where to drag him, her arms numb, breath fogging in the cold. Inside, the heater hummed weakly, throwing light across peeling wallpaper and a worn sofa. She lowered the man carefully onto her cot. His shirt stuck to her hands, wet with blood and rain. "Lord, don't let him die on me," she whispered, grabbing the first aid kit from the counter. She cleaned the cuts with trembling fingers. Every hiss of pain he gave made her flinch too. When she finally wrapped his ribs, she sat back on her heels, heart pounding. He was pale but breathing, the rise and fall of his chest steady now. For a moment, she just watched, try to understand how someone dressed like a Wall Street prince ended up broken in her arms. His wallet lay half open on the floor. She picked it up, then stopped herself. "Ain't my business," she muttered, setting it aside. Instead, she focused on the kettle, pouring boiling water into a chipped mug. Steam filled the air with a smell like home, burnt coffee and old sugar. The man stirred. His lips moved, but no words came out. Imani leaned closer. "You're safe now. Just rest, okay?" He turned his head slightly, face twitching with pain. For the first time she saw his age, mid-30s maybe, soft around the jaw but worn at the edges. "Who did this to you?" she whispered. No answer. She sat beside the cot, elbows on her knees, staring at the cracked linoleum. Her phone screen blinked with no signal. The silence pressed heavy. Earlier that day, she'd been begging for mercy from a woman who had none. Tonight, she was giving it to a stranger. The irony wasn't lost on her. "Funny, ain't it?" she said under her breath. "The world don't ever balance unless we do it ourselves." Outside, thunder rolled away into distance. Inside, the only sound was the steady hum of that little heater fighting off the dark. She took one last look at the man's bruised face, then whispered, "Sleep. Tomorrow we figure out who you are and why somebody wanted you gone." Morning light crept through the thin curtains, painting the walls in pale gold. The stranger still hadn't moved. His breathing was steadier now, but Imani hadn't slept a second. She sat with her chin resting on her fist, staring at him, wondering what story those bruises were trying to tell. When she finally stood to stretch, something caught her eye, the jacket she'd hung by the chair. Inside, the lining bulged slightly. Curiosity got the better of her. She reached in and pulled out a leather wallet and a folded card. Her heart slowed as she flipped it open. Logan Whitmore. The name hit her like a jolt. She'd heard it before, on the news, in whispered conversations at the diner. A billionaire missing for days. Police still searching. Reward offered. Imani sank onto the edge of the bed, staring at the photo on the ID. The same sharp jaw, the same gray-blue eyes, just not bruised and swollen like this. Lord have mercy, she whispered. What in the world have I stepped into? She looked back at the man, then at the door. Call the police? Her mind screamed, but her gut said no. The same system that looked past her tears yesterday wouldn't protect this man today if powerful people wanted him gone. He stirred, lips trembling. Imani leaned closer. Logan, she said softly, testing the name. His eyes fluttered open, cloudy, unfocused. They burned my chair, he murmured. Her chest tightened. Who did this to you? His hand twitched weakly. My brother, he said I didn't deserve to lead. Then he slipped back into unconsciousness. Imani sat frozen, the words echoing in her head. Brother, power, betrayal. This wasn't random violence. It was something planned. She rose, pacing the small room. Her reflection in the window looked like a ghost, dark skin, tired eyes, still wearing the same soaked uniform from yesterday. What am I supposed to do with you? She whispered. You're rich enough to buy this whole county, and I can't even buy breakfast. The heater buzzed louder, filling the silence. She glanced at the man again. Despite everything, there was something fragile about him, like the kind of man who'd never had to beg, finally learning what it felt like. Imani sighed. Fine, you stay here till you can talk sense. But if the devil himself comes knocking, I'm pretending I don't know your name. She closed the curtains tight, locking the door. Outside, a police siren wailed somewhere in the distance. Inside, her tiny home held a secret powerful enough to burn cities. If this happened right in front of you, what would you do? Tell me in the comments. I read every one. And if you want justice as much as I do, hit subscribe. Imani nearly dropped the mug when she heard him groan. She spun around. The billionaire was awake. His eyes were half open, bloodshot but aware. Easy, she said quickly. You're safe here. You've been through hell. He blinked, studying her face, then the small, cramped room around them. Where am I? My place, she said. Don't worry. I ain't calling no cops till I know who's trying to kill you. He tried to sit up but winced, gripping his ribs. I didn't mean to drag you into this. Imani crossed her arms. Too late for that, Mr. Whitmore. He turned sharply. You know my name? Wallet told me. He sighed, closing his eyes. Then you know why I can't go to the police. My brother, he runs a company now. He's got friends everywhere, even in uniform. Imani watched him, her anger building. So you're saying the man on TV talking about bringing you home safe is the one who tried to kill you? His silence was the answer. She shook her head slowly. Figures. Rich folks turn on each other faster than they turn on the news. Despite the pain, Logan let out a small, tired laugh. You don't trust easily, do you? Not anymore, she said. But you don't have to trust me either. Just eat something and heal before whoever did this finds out you're still breathing. He looked at her, really looked, and something softened in his expression. Why help me at all? You don't even know me. Imani poured him a cup of water, set it beside him, because I know what it's like to be left out in the cold while people with power look the other way. Maybe this time I get to change that. He held her gaze. You saved my life. She shrugged. You'd have done the same. I'm not sure I would have, he admitted quietly. That honesty made her pause. She grabbed her jacket and pulled it on. Rest. Tomorrow, we figure out how deep this mess runs. As she reached the door, he said softly, Imani, thank you. She didn't turn around. "Don't thank me yet," she said. "We still got a fight coming." The heater hummed again, steady this time, like a heartbeat that refused to stop. Late afternoon light spilled through the cracked blind when a knock came. 3 short, sharp raps that didn't sound neighborly. Imani froze, sponge in hand. Logan's head jerked up from the cot. "Who is it?" he whispered. She shook her head. "Quiet." Another knock, louder this time. "Miss Imani Williams?" A man's voice called from outside, smooth and confident. "Sorry to bother you, ma'am. I just need a minute of your time." Her stomach tightened. No one in her neighborhood ever said, "ma'am." She glanced at Logan. His face had gone pale again. "Don't open it," he mouthed. Imani moved silently toward the door, peeking through the thin curtain. A man in a gray suit stood on the porch, one hand tucked in his coat pocket. His car, black, shiny, too clean for this street, idled at the curb. "I'm with Whitmore Holdings," he said, raising a card. "We're conducting a private inquiry about Mr. Logan Whitmore's disappearance." Every nerve in her body screamed lie. She cracked the door just an inch, enough for her voice but not her face. "Ain't no billionaires hiding here, sir. You sure you got the right house?" He smiled politely, the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. Word travels fast in small towns. "People said you were kind to a stranger last night. Maybe that stranger needs help again." Her pulse quickened. "You calling me a liar?" "Of course not," he said, still smiling. "Just offering a little reward for information. 10,000 cash." Behind her, Logan's voice whispered, "That's him. That's Kyle's man." Imani's grip on the doorknob tightened. "Sir, I don't need your money. Now, if you'll excuse me." The man's tone sharpened just enough to cut. Sometimes people stumble into situations they don't understand. When that happens, the smart ones step aside. That was enough. Imani slammed the door and threw the lock. Her hands trembled as she backed away. Outside, footsteps lingered a moment, then faded toward the car. She turned to Logan. "He knows. Maybe not everything, but enough." Logan nodded grimly. "Then we move. Tonight." "Where?" "There's a cabin off Route 19. Secluded. My mother's old place. We'll be safe there until I contact someone I trust." Imani exhaled slowly. "All right then. You rest while I pack. But next time that man shows up," she looked at the window, jaw tight, "he's gonna wish he knocked somewhere else." The night stretched long and heavy as Imani drove through the back roads, headlights cutting through mist. Logan sat beside her, pale but alert, clutching a small flash drive like it was his heartbeat. "This is the proof?" she asked. He nodded. "Financial records, audio files, everything my brother did to cover his tracks." By dawn, they reached the old cabin, quiet, wrapped in pine and fog. The place smelled like dust and memory. Imani helped him inside, settled him near the window. "All right, Mr. Billionaire," she said, half teasing. "What's the plan?" Logan's tired smile faded. "I have a contact, a journalist I can trust. If we get this to her, Kyle's done." Imani crossed her arms. "Then let's light him up." They worked through the day. Logan typed slowly, sending encrypted files and messages while Imani kept watch. Her eyes scanned every sound outside, the crunch of branches, the hum of the wind. At sunset, Logan looked up. She replied, "She's coming tonight." Hours later, a car rolled up the dirt road. A woman stepped out mid-40s, confident, carrying a small camera bag. "Claudia Benton," she introduced herself. "You really don't make it easy to find you, Logan." Imani watched the two exchange a look that spoke of trust and danger. Claudia plugged in the drive, eyes widening as she read through files. "These are corporate bombs," she whispered. "Safety reports faked. Investors lied to. Millions stolen. Your brother's going down." Logan's voice was steady. "I just want the truth out. I don't care about my name anymore." Claudia glanced at Imani. "And you?" Imani met her gaze without blinking. "I just want him to see what it feels like to beg for mercy." By morning, the article was live. Billionaire whistleblower found alive, exposes corruption inside Whitmore Holdings. News spread like wildfire. Kyle Whitmore's face filled every channel, not as a savior but a fraud. The empire he built started crumbling before noon. Logan sat quietly by the window, watching the sunrise. Imani poured 2 cups of instant coffee. "Feels strange," she said softly, "helping a man who could buy the world, but couldn't see its people." He looked at her, eyes tired but clear. "I see them now." The world outside buzzed with justice. Inside, 2 survivors sat in silence, one who'd lost everything and one who'd finally found her worth. Morning sunlight drifted to the cabin's open window, soft and golden. The chaos outside had slowed. No reporters, no police, no more footsteps on gravel. Just the sound of wind and the faint hiss of the coffee pot on the stove. Imani stood by the door, arms folded, staring at the forest beyond. For the first time in days, there was peace, the kind that didn't feel borrowed. Logan wheeled himself forward. His bruises faded now to faint reminders. "You could have left me there," he said quietly. "You risked everything for someone you didn't know." Imani gave a half smile. "You weren't just someone. You were proof that even the powerful can fall, and the powerless can still choose mercy." He nodded, his eyes glistening. "I don't know how to repay you." "You already did," she said. "The truth's out there. That's payment enough." A beat of silence passed. Then he reached into his coat and pulled out an envelope. "This isn't charity," he said. "It's partnership. You saw what I couldn't. People who actually matter. Help me rebuild something better." Imani looked at the envelope, then at him. "I don't need your money, Logan. I just need you to keep your promise. Remember people like me when the world forgets again." He nodded, voice low. "I will." She smiled faintly. "Then we're good." Outside, a truck rumbled by, a reminder that life kept moving. She watched it fade down the road, then turned back to him. "You heading back to the city?" "Eventually," he said, "but not without saying goodbye properly." He extended his hand. She shook it firmly. 2 survivors bound by something deeper than luck. Imani stepped out into the morning air. The skies stretched wide and clean. The same road ahead where she'd once found a dying man now glittering with sunlight. She whispered, almost to herself, "Funny how the same road that broke you can be the one that saves you." If you believe this should never happen again, share this now. And to my USA, UK, and Canadian viewers, your voice is power. Use it.